So I'm just going to talk about adults, treatment of adults with osteogenesis imperfecta. I'm a rheumatologist. I see adults, obviously, and also patients with osteogenesis imperfecta. And I'm going to talk about the treatment options in adults. You've already heard very eloquently about kids, but what do we do in adults with OI? First of all, as you've heard, osteogenesis is due almost always to an abnormality in the collagen. And collagen is the protein that makes up your bone. And it's assembled into these fibrils here, these little fibers. And the mineral, that calcium, deposits in between the fibrils, and that's why you get the bone. Now, genetic abnormalities in the collagen genes mostly are the cause of OI. The commonest one is what we call type 1. That's a milder form, but there's other types of more severe OI. And in those, the collagen protein is normal, whereas in type 1, as we call it, the collagen protein is actually normal, but it's just not there in enough amount. Now, we already heard that in fact I was reading the booklet, that some people confuse osteogenesis with osteoporosis. And although in both conditions you get broken bones or fractures, they are quite different. And I've listed some of the differences here. So in osteoporosis, the bone density is low and we get fractures. However, osteoporosis mainly affects older people and the bone collagen is normal. And the main cause of osteoporosis is as we get older, your bone is lost, unfortunately. In osteogenesis, though, it's a bit different. Now, the bone density can be low in osteogenesis imperfecta, but it's variable. Sometimes it's normal, and actually sometimes it's high. So there's a difference straight away. You get fractures, but you get lots of fractures, as I'm sure all of you that have osteogenesis will know. 10 maybe or 100 times as many fractures as in osteoporosis. So the risk of fracture is a lot higher. And also, as we've heard, it affects people of all ages, from kids. Of course, kids grow up to be adults, and they still get fractures. As I mentioned, either the amount of collagen present is reduced or the collagen is abnormal. So there's some similarities between osteoporosis and osteogenesis, but they are different. And coming to treatment of these conditions, I want to tell you a bit about how our bones are kept healthy. And that is called bone remodeling. Now, bone remodeling is a process whereby your bone is renewed and repaired. And this happens in all of us. It happens in whether you have osteogenesis or whether you don't have osteogenesis. This renewal repair process goes on all the time. And it's a bit like this. So it starts when cells called osteoclasts, they're coloured red in my little diagram there, their job is to detect areas of micro damage in bone, and they come along and they eat away at the damaged bone, and then after about 10 days they move away. The cells die actually, and then they're replaced by cells called osteoblasts, which form bone. They're coloured purple in the bottom of my little diagram. And then in health, the hole is filled in and everything is back to normal. So in health, the amount removed is equal by the amount replaced. But in osteoporosis, and probably in osteogenesis, there may be an imbalance between these processes, and that can cause bone loss or bone damage. And the treatments that we use, both for osteogenesis and for osteoporosis, they affect this cycle. And there's two types. One is called anti-resorbatives. That's what us docs call them. The most commonly used type of anti-resorbatives is bisphosphonates, which you've all heard of, you heard of earlier. So anti-resorbatives are the core treatment, but also we have drugs called anabolics. They're mainly being used in osteoporosis, and they build up new bone. So you get these two ways of attacking the system. You can either stop the osteoclast resorbing bone, or you can encourage the osteoblasts to build up new bone. And these are the drugs that are commonly used in both conditions. So in osteoporosis, we use bisphosphonates a lot. That's the kind of core treatment. Drugs like alendronate, risedronate, zoledronate or zoledronic acid, and ibandronate. We also use a drug called denosumab, which is an anti-resorptive as well. And occasionally, so all of those drugs are anti-resorptive, but occasionally we use a drug called teriparatide, okay? And teriparatide is the only drug we have that builds up new bone. If we turn to osteogenesis, pretty much the core treatment is bisphosphonates. And I guess many of patients or people in the audience will have had these. Maybe pamidronate. Who's had pamidronate? A lot of people had pamidronate. Sorry, I've not had pamidronate. Anyone had zoledronic acid? A couple. Anyone alendronate? A few. Risedronate. So a lot of you are familiar with these drugs, and they're used a lot in osteogenesis. What?
Can I just put in a box?
Uh-huh.
I'm on denosumab.
Okay, that's unusual. That is very unusual.
Rolling bone.
Okay. Well, denosumab mainly stops the resorption of bone rather than building new bone, but it's a different class of drug from the bisphosphonates. Now, I'm going to say a little word about the bisphosphonates. They're so widely used. A little historical point. How did these drugs come about? Not many people know this, but actually they were developed by the soap powder industry, Procter & Gamble, as water softening agents. And they were developed so that the calcium didn't fill up the pipes in your washing machine. But then the scientists, this is absolutely true, at Procter & Gamble decided, well, they bind to calcium, maybe they'll get some effect on bone, and actually they do. And they bind onto the bone and they stop the bone being resorbed, as shown here. So when the bisphosphonates are given, either by an injection or by tablets, they go into the circulation, they bind onto the bone surface, which is there, and the osteoclasts come along to eat away the damaged bone, but this time it's a poison meal, okay? They eat away the bone that's covered with bisphosphonates. The bisphosphonates are released inside the osteoclast, the bone-resorbing cell. And basically, the bone-resorbing cell dies. It's like a poison meal, okay? And because of that, the bone density increases. And we've realized over recent years, it used to be thought that bisphosphonates made new bone, but they don't. What happens is what's called the mineralization of bone increases. That's the main mechanism by which bisphosphonates increase your bone density. The mineral becomes more dense. Now, I'm going to tell you about bone mineralization because it's quite important. Bone mineralization varies. If it's too low, it's bad because then your bones are weak. That's on the left-hand side. If it's too high, that's bad as well. If your bones are far too mineralized, they become brittle and they can break. But there's what I call a sweet spot in between where it's just right, okay? Just the correct degree of mineralization. So it's a bit like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. This is my analogy. So you remember Goldilocks? She had the baby bear's porridge, that was too cold. She had the daddy bear's porridge, that was too hot. But then she went to the mummy bear's porridge and that was just right. And that's where you want your mineralization to be. Now, what do bisphosphonates do? Well, they're used a lot in kids, both pamidronate, and I'm showing a picture of Professor Nick Bishop's study with risedronate and other bisphosphonate. And in kids, it seems as though they have beneficial effects on the bone and beneficial effects in mineralization. We see these lines that you saw a picture before. That is mineralization coinciding with the bisphosphonate. So probably what they do in kids is that in kids, when the skeleton is growing, the mineralization tends to be on the low side because the skeleton is growing, the bones are slightly under-mineralized, if you like. And bisphosphonates probably move the curve to the right and things are just right. So there's Goldilocks. Bisphosphonates in your kid, yum yum, very good. That's probably shifted your mineralization the right way. In adults, we're not so sure. There's been less studies of bisphosphonates in adults. The ones that have been performed show that the bone density does increase, but we've not seen a reduction in bone fractures. Admittedly, the studies have been too small, or have been small, and of course you can get side effects. So in adults, there is some uncertainty. Do bisphosphonates work? Do they prevent fractures? We're not sure. And this will lead into the research I'm going to talk about because we want to find out a little bit more if we can do better in adults. So there's adults. The mineralization there's a worry that bisphosphonates in adults might make the mineral too much, but we don't know, to be quite honest. So there's Goldilocks there. That's not so good. Now, reflecting this fact, many adult doctors like me were uncertain whether we should be giving patients bisphosphonates or not. And this was a survey we did when we were working up to our grant, along with the Brittle Bone Society. It was posted on the website. Some of you may actually have participated in it. And it turned out that nearly 70%, this is of adults with osteogenesis, were not being treated with bisphosphonates. So most adults are not given bisphosphonates. About 13% were with alendronate, 7% risedronate, and about 5% each. And I think if you did this with kids, I'm sure it'd be totally different. I'm sure a lot of kids, or most kids, would that be true? Like,
with vertebral fracture.
Yeah. So pretty much all kids with vertebral fractures would be having bisphosphonates. But in adults, there's uncertainty, and reflected really by that survey. And it has been alluded to the fact if you overdo bisphosphonates and give too much, that can be counterproductive, and you can weaken the bones because you impair this renewal and repair process. So, where do we go from here? We've got the bisphosphonates, but what is next? Can we move forward? Well, I did a bit of a literature review of stuff that's been done in osteogenesis over the years. There have been various things tried. There has been what's called gene therapy, like to correct the gene. That was attempted in 2002. It didn't look like it was terribly effective, and I'm not aware of any other gene therapy studies going on now. So that's a long time ago, and I don't think there's been much progress. There was so-called stem cell therapy. That was tried in 1999, many years ago, nearly 16 years ago, and then nothing happened. Although many of you may know there's now a stem cell treatment being trialed very soon for babies with OI, even before they're born. So obviously it's something that might be beneficial, but we don't know. It's very early stages. There's another drug called sclerostin antibody that forms new bone. It's an anabolic drug. That has showing some promising results in mice with osteogenesis. And there is a clinical trial probably coming, but not yet here. And then there is a drug called teriparatide, which we use in osteoporosis. It's got good results there, and it works by increasing bone formation. And teriparatide has been studied a little in osteogenesis. I don't know, has anyone had teriparatide? One person, two people. It's sometimes used, but it's difficult to get because it's expensive, and doctors in the NHS are not really allowed to prescribe it unless they can somehow persuade someone in their health board to pay for it. It's much, much more expensive than other drugs. So, but it has been tried. It increases bone density. The studies that have been done have not shown an effect on fractures, but it was going in the right direction. So that prompted us to consider a trial, and we're going to be starting this soon, in which we're giving teriparatide, and we're following up with a shot of zoledronic acid, which many of you have had, and we're going to try that out in osteogenesis imperfecta. And we call that the Topaz study, which stands for Treatment of Osteogenesis Imperfecta with PTH, that's the real name for teriparatide, and zoledronic acid, Topaz. One of the key things if you're running a trial is to have a snappy acronym, and we think that is pretty good, okay? So what the trial will involve is this. We're going to invite people with osteogenesis, adults, i.e. above 18, do you want to take part in the study? If they are interested, you'll be allocated either to have teriparatide injections followed by Zol, or you'll just have whatever your usual treatment is. And that might be bisphosphonates, it might be no treatment, it will be on discussion between you and whoever is looking after your normal care. So the Topaz study, and that's the whatever it is, the icon for it too, which I thought was okay as well. Anyway, you might be wondering, would I be eligible for the Topaz study? Well, almost certainly yes. Obviously, I'm trying to sell this study hard. But if you are age greater than 18, if you're male or female, as long as you're not pregnant or breastfeeding, and if you've been diagnosed with OI, you could be eligible to take part in this study. And I very much hope you're going to spread the word to other people, because we're looking for nearly 400 patients all across the UK to take part in it. What does it involve? Well, if you do decide to take part, you'll have some blood samples, a DEXA, which I guess everyone would be familiar with, an X-ray of the back, complete some questionnaires, and then you start the treatment. So that might be teriparatide and Zoll, or it might be just continuing with whatever treatment you're on. We will see you at 1 year, where we'll do some bloods and questionnaires. We'll see you at 2 years, where we'll repeat the DEXA questionnaires. If you're now on the teriparatide group, you'll stop that treatment and have your infusion of Zoll. And if you're in the normal care group, you just kind of carry on with whatever you're doing. And then we reckon there'll be another visit about 4 years when we'll look at all the results. We'll count up how many fractures people have had, we'll do another X-ray, and then we will find out if this new treatment is better than standard care, basically. So, is there a centre near you? We've got 25 centres across the UK. They're shown there. I hope that people, even if there isn't a centre in your town, they might be able to make it to a centre, given that it's only like one visit a year. And I've just been speaking to Dr. Malachi McKenna, from Dublin, and it looks like we might be able to set up a centre in Dublin too, which would be absolutely fantastic. So I'm glad I came, and I'm glad you came too, Malachi. So that's the Topaz study. So the times are changing for osteogenesis imperfecta. When I see my patients that they come to the clinic and I go over the treatments, many of them say, "But Prof, you mean we don't know if bisphosphonates work?" And I said, yeah, we don't know if bisphosphonates work in adults. We know they increase bone density. We don't know if they prevent fractures. And a lot of my patients are saying, that's terrible. Why hasn't a study been done to find out? And I said, well, yeah, that's a very good point. And that actually led to the development and the design, because we want to do the right thing for our patients. And so previous trials have been too small, there have been too much focus on bone density. Most have not compared different treatments. Most have maybe treated a bunch of patients, but there's not been a comparison. And the Topaz study will be the first ever trial in either adults or kids to look at fractures. It looks like we're on schedule to start in next January. Now, in the program it says an update on the EME. The EME stands for the Efficacy of Medicine Evaluations. That's the kind of arm of the Medical Research Council that hands out grants. The study has not been absolutely confirmed as funded, but we believe that it's very, very, very likely. So it's like the check's in the post, but it hasn't reached our bank account yet. But we're fairly confident that it will be funded. So watch this space. I hope that's been of interest. And I'd be very happy to answer questions either about that study or anything, or bisphosphonates, or denosumab. Thank you.